obviously there's been a lot of politics and controversy with commercial fishing. We just talked about that the end of commercial fishing, that last law that put commercial fishing to an end on Lake of the Woods. But
Yeah.
which you've pulled up, you've actually got the actual legal print of it.
Yeah. Yep, 23rd of May, 1983 was the law
That
that
passed.
was the end, yeah.
So
Right.
1982 is the compromise. All right, you can pass these fishing license, you can transfer these fishing license, and 13 months, 14 months later, there's a law that's passed.
Yep. Yep.
So February 1982, you can transfer your license, and May of 1983, sorry, but you're done.
Yeah. Yep. And yeah, it happened real fast. And of course, we had, as I mentioned, we had the fishing. We take the fish. This was supposed to be a biological study. We knew nobody cared about the biology of it. They just wanted to get rid of us, including the DNR. They couldn't care less about fishery biology, fishery science. They just wanted to get rid of us. And so, yeah, we had the compromise. We transferred the licenses. We thought things were going to happen good. We could continue with our livelihood. Then it was actually April 7th I found out from Colin Peterson's office in the DNR. The DNR wrote a proposal that went into the legislature. And that eventually passed, and there were several reasons that happened. The DNR seemed to be somewhat on our side because they kept admitting they never did say that the fishery stock was being jeopardized on the lake. The DNR always said it was okay, so a couple of things happened there between those two periods. One, we had an election. We had Nysether was a House representative from our area, which was, I think we were Senate District 1 even back in those days. Then we had two people running. One was Fuzz LePage, who was used to bush pilot here, and the other one was Jim Tunheim. And Jim Tunheim was somewhere down in the southern part of the district, and he was just a lackey for the anti-fishing people. And unfortunately, he won. And he said right away that he was opposed to fishing. Even though we were in his district, he couldn't give a hoot about us, and he just let us basically hang in the wind. The other guy that happened, we had a senator, was it Sinclair? No, it wasn't. It was Hanson, another Hanson. I forget what his name was, but he didn't run again. And Leroy Stump got elected as a senator for our district. And he couldn't care less about fishing. He was from down by, I don't know, Malung or something. Couldn't care less about it and didn't pay any attention to it at all. Also, Governor Rudy Purpich got elected. And we thought he was on our side. In fact, I just read about this morning, and I had remembered this, but my dad wrote it in the book. So we went down, we thought Rudy Purpich, we were trying to play politics, right? And we didn't know squat about politics. We were naive. We actually thought politics was based on honesty and integrity and doing the right thing for the right reason. We were naive. But anyway, we actually gave $500 to Rudy Purpich. We met with him, and my dad talked about it in the book. It was funny because I remembered exactly the same thing my dad wrote. Well, I hadn't read my dad's book for 20 years probably. And yeah, he patted us on. Oh yeah, we're friends of you. We're going to make sure you keep going. We gave him $500, and that literally ended up being put down as from some anti-abortion, pro-life thing. It's like, oh my God, it's like what a bunch of sleazeballs, and which was obviously these people. So that happened, and also the DNR. We'll get back into. You want to talk about the trawler? Chuck Burrows was a promoter of the trawler, but he was also somewhat of a promoter of commercial fishing. And my dad knew him well. I didn't know him too well, but my dad talked about him a lot. He retired, and Dick Hassinger became the new Game and Fish thing. he told us many times, in fact, it was in my dad's book again, I had read about it this morning, that he told us, he said, hey, sportsmen pay my way and I do what they say. He couldn't care less about the fish stock or the integrity of the fisheries in Lake of the Woods. He just cared about where was his money coming from. And he told us that many times. And that was the DNR. So they all, basically, everybody ganged up on us and they said, we're going to pass this law, which eventually got passed. And the key for the DNR, and my dad put this in his book too, and I forgot that he had to put this in the book, is that they put a $2.50 surcharge, which raised about $2 million a year for the DNR. And that was supposedly to pay us off, right? Well, it paid us off. I think it goes show you the record. The total amount of payout was like $800,000. And that surcharge is still on. I mean, they've raised $100 million on that surcharge. So the DNR wanted it. And it was interesting. Battaglia, he was a representative from Duluth. He had commercial fishermen over there. And he didn't want to give us any money. Boy, some of these people are just nasty people. But eventually it did pass. But I know I went into one of the hearings, and Jack Wingate, he was a head research guy for the DNR. And we thought they were on our friends, and they walked out of the room. I said, hey, what the heck just happened here? And they wouldn't even talk to us anymore. They just said, hey, sorry, buddy. Hey, we got our $2.50. We don't care what's happened to you. So we just negotiated basically with Colin Peterson and his staff, trying to argue over discount rates and stuff and a bunch of hocus pocus that will eventually happen. But, how did this happen? I just want to talk a little bit about the sport fishing pressure. As, read a bunch of these articles that, preparing for talking to you, Brady. Thanks for getting me here. It was kind of fun. But, they had big groups. They ran their groups kind of like Ducks Unlimited. Down in the cities, they had 800 people. I was down there to that. I mean, they had 800 people. They had, I think it was Bud Grant was down there. They had a bunch of the Ron Schra, the big sports writer for the Minneapolis Star and Tribune. They had the Linders, the End Fisherman people were down there. The Outdoor Life magazine is still being published. They had all kinds of big articles about how, and the stuff they talked about us it was just really nasty stuff. And my dad, I'll give it to you, we copied all the stuff that they said. They said that we were paying off Joseph Alexander, he was the commissioner of the DNR. And they said we were hanging out with prostitutes, all this other kind of garbage. I mean, they just made up everything they could. I mean, they didn't care if it was right or wrong. They just made it up, and they got published. And papers were dumb enough to publish that they wouldn't even check into anything. So it was really quite nasty politics. But that's the way politics is. I've learned since then. But we were naive, and we thought that we were trying to be honest and sincere, and we got chewed up pretty bad. But it was kind of funny because they went after the DNR a lot, the Save Our Game Fish Committee. That was all the sportsmen and Baudette, a bunch of people from Greenbush, Doug Wall from Greenbush. Don't ask me why they cared about any of this stuff, but they did. And they raised thousands and thousands of dollars on this Ducks Unlimited stuff. And I think one of the things, in fact, I think I got it to you, the Save Our Game Fish Committee was the 6th biggest lobbying group in Minnesota for those 2 years. And they put a lot of money into destroying us. And just it's all garbage. It was just all garbage. So why the DNR decided to side with them, even though they went after the DNR, I don't know. It was kind of sad, but you really lost faith. That's why I say fisheries science is an oxymoron, because DNR doesn't care about what the science said. It was just all politics for them. And as nowadays, you're talking to politics nowadays, hey, I don't want to get into that, but it's been that way for a long time. Yeah. And so we got beat up. Got beat up pretty bad.
So the lobbying group, was lobbying extremely hard at the end there, the early 80s. Yeah. After 82, they issue you that license. They have the transfer of a license, and then it's kind of all war against the commercial fishermen after they made this agreement with the DNR.
Yeah. Well, it started in about 78. It got to be really intense. These people, the John Beckles and the Sportsman's Lodge and all the Baudette resorts, they gained up with all these people from Moorhead, the senators from there, and Colin Peterson, of course, he was from Detroit Lakes, and it was really bad from about 1978 up to until it finally ended in '83. Was pretty bad, and just all garbage. I mean, all their arguments were just all garbage. The people are not nice people, and it's growing up in Warroad, we always thought about integrity and honesty, and we found out really quick that there wasn't any of that in this battle. And it was a nasty, ugly battle. It was just all character assassination, just made up stuff about the lake. And how can you fight up stuff that people just make up? It's really hard to politically fight something when somebody's just making up garbage, throwing out at you day after day after day.
So, you talk about, these meetings or calls with, Colin Peterson. How involved are you in trying to fight against the lobbying? Are you just calling your representative? Are you going down to the cities and speaking at committee meetings? How is this?
Yeah, no, we did everything. We looking back, again, finding all the files here that I'll give to you eventually here. We did a lot. When Tunheim got elected and Stump got elected, hey, we sent him, hey, you got elected, congratulations. We want to meet with you in your office and see it because we knew there was controversy going on. Whenever there was hearings, when we found out about them, we'd go down to the hearings a lot. And we were doing everything we could, write articles. I wrote many articles on papers about trying to refute all the garbage stuff that they said about us. And it wasn't successful. Again, people like Battaglia down, they couldn't care less. I mean, they would cut us off. They wouldn't even allow us to speak. And it certainly was democracy at its worst. But we tried, but not successful.
Yeah. But that wasn't. So this is the end of it. This is the '80s right now.
Yeah. Right.
Late '70s, early '80s. This is kind of what it. And how often are you going down to the cities?
Oh, probably. Oh boy. Pretty regular, I would say, probably every couple months on an average.
Okay.
Something would be going on, we'd go down. We used to go to some of these Ducks Unlimited type fundraisers and stuff, trying to talk to people and just to let them know, hey, we're just normal human beings here.
Yeah.
And so we went down to all those all the time. We'd write up stuff. I didn't know I was such a writer, but I looked at all the stuff and said, oh my gosh, we wrote a lot of stuff. Trying to survive, but we obviously didn't get it to the right people. We weren't dishonest and crooked, and if you're not dishonest and crooked, you're not going to be successful in politics.
Yeah. So did you did you ever receive a lot of like hate and flack when you would go to these like Save Our Game Fish like type events, fundraisers?
No, everybody kind of accepted us. Really, they were always somewhat nice to our face. It was kind of odd because most of these people, the ones out in the cities, were the people like the Al Linders and the Outdoor Life people and the Bud Grants and all the celebrities. But normally the people like over in Grand Forks and Roseau and places like that, they were just farmers. And it was really odd that they were so vicious toward us. They allowed people like Dick Knutson to just make up garbage. And just nobody would ever call them on it. They'd just throwing their money at them, and it was depressing for sure. And it was kind of ironic too. I remember Colin Peterson introduced a law going on at the same time that it was illegal. We had fines for people to harass hunting and fishermen. This was back in the PETA days and everything. Ooh, you can't. Hunting is bad. Blah blah blah. Well, they passed laws that people could not harass hunters. I mean, these were good laws to pass. But apparently it didn't apply to us. These people could just harass us to no end, make up stuff all they wanted, and nobody cared. And so it was all like, it was depressing and kind of ironic.
Yeah.
But we survived.
We
survived. I survived.
Yeah.
Fishing didn't.
Yes, exactly. So the end of commercial fishing is obviously a huge political conflict, but that's not the only large political conflict that was seen with commercial fishing, particularly in the 60s. this is when we see the introduction of commercial fishing trawlers.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing you didn't have. Were you assisting in the politics of commercial? Can you tell us a little bit about the trawling operation that happened?
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely, and it's an interesting sidelight of what we're talking about here. But the trawling was introduced, I think, in '61 and '62. They were experimental both those years, and the law passed that was non-experimental for 2 years, and then it went away. And my dad talks about a lot in his book too. But '61. I was only 10 years old.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I heard about it. I remember hearing about it, but most of the stuff I learned about from the trawler has been reading my dad's and talking to my dad about it. And then it ended in, I think, in '64, and I was only in 8th grade. And so still pretty young, so I wasn't doing any politics at all on the trawler. But I did listen to Doug Johnston. He had his interview.
Mm-hmm.
It's really great, Brad. You're getting some of these interviews, some of us old timers here. It's really nice. Even I don't agree with Doug on most of the stuff on the trawler, but it's an interesting jumping off point. I look at the trawler. Well, there's lots of aspects of the trawler. Just to touch on a few of them is that who got the license. And I know you want to talk about mink farming too, but the mink farming was really, somewhat involved at the time. Chuck Burrows was very involved. He was the head of Game and Fish at the time. And I think the main emphasis, the main driving force, the bureaucratic driving force of the trawler was, one, harvest rough fish, which was a tulipy, in this case to feed fish, or to feed mink. And the other one was to try to remove the commercial fishermen from taking game fish, which everybody knew that was going to be the future, and taking walleyes for food was not a good thing. But so those were the two drains. Now the reality was, who got the licenses? I think Doug talked about I do remember vaguely about these boats coming in, the Jack and the JC and Jean coming in town, and one of the licenses was Heinen, and Heinen had, I don't know, the biggest mink farm, I don't know, maybe in the world, I don't know.
Yeah,
but it was big. It was big, and it was interesting. Heinen, according to my dad, I just read another thing my dad had written. It hasn't been published, but he said that spring steels used to be named after the guy that fished off of spring steels. He had a ponette operation, fished around spring steels back, I'm guessing, 1930s or something. And he sold his license, according to my dad, to the Heinens. Heinens went and put ponets up on Sandy Beach. This was before I would do anything. I'm guessing this was back in the mid-'60s or before the trawler days. I don't know. And I don't think that was very successful, but anyway, they did have a thing. So anyway, George Heinen got one of the trawler licenses. And I think with Happy Flow, and the other trawler license was John Pick, and I think Julius Anderson.
I think Julius and John Heinen, I think they were together, were they not?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, was it Julius and I forget who ran the boats.
I think I want to say that George Bushy ran the boat and
for
Heinen and Julius Anderson.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And then it was John Pick and Harold Flo.
Yeah, or Happy Flo.
Happy.
Yeah, right.
That had the other one.
Yeah. Yep. I think. Yeah, you're right. I always kind of mixed the stuff up. I think Doug had it right when he talked about that. That was a good history that Doug had on it. So anyway, they got licenses. I don't know how. Doug Johnston said that Happy Flow had a license. None of those people were active. I don't know how they got the license. That was before I was paying any attention, so I don't know what was going on. But anyway, they got the two licenses. Why did they two people get the licenses and the other fishermen didn't? Well, there a lot of mink farms were here. My dad had a mink farm. Dorrance, my uncle, had a mink farm. Happy Flow had a mink farm. Linders had a mink farm. I think Julius Anderson had a mink farm. Everybody had mink farms.
Yeah, everyone had a mink farm.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of times I've gone through the back and they'll say, "Oh, so and so had a mink farm," and it might have only been 40 mink or something, but there was a lot of people that had
Yeah.
had it. It's like instead of backyard chickens that we see today, it was
Yeah.
backyard mink farms.
Well, there was money in it apparently, and rightfully, I think it's rightfully so that fish were part of it here because we haven't talked about this, but a little bit. Tulipies used to be a human food in this area back in apparently up to about 1940 or something. Apparently, and I found something, Brady, on this. After the fishing ended, I found a copy of the FDA regulation that banned tulipies from human consumption. But I can't find that yet. It's somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Maybe you can find it. But anyway, the tulipies weren't worth anything at that point. When that went in, the tulipy market died. Tulipies used to be worth as much as walleyes because it was a local fish, a local food for humans. Hey, that died, so then people started feeding them to mink, and they had to feed the mink something. Mink was a lot of money, so then that's so I think that had emphasis on the trawler. And I wasn't involved, but reading back on it recently, Brady, some of my thoughts on the trawler are it was kind of silly. There was no trawlers anywhere in inland lakes, as far as I know, in the world. Somebody had this bright idea: let's start catching all the tulipies with trawlers. And I don't know if that was a legitimate idea. I literally say it's kind of silly. I look at it as being kind of a solution trying to find a problem. And I don't really worry too much about was the trawler catching all the fish, destroying the sport fishery. I think that's all that stuff is a little bit hokey personally. But, we already had a fishery. It was already feeding the mink. The mink had been around a long time. George Heinen had mink for years, and we didn't need a trawler. Trawlers were very unusual for inland lakes, and it ended up making a lot of controversy. And so I thought, looking back on the stuff, mainly from my father's point of view, and obviously Doug Johnston has a different point of view, I look at it just being, why were we doing this? What was the point? And of course now, obviously, if the trawlers would have stayed on the lake, they wouldn't be there because there's no market for tulipies. Mm-hmm. Why do you want to catch 1 million pounds of tulipies if there's no mink farms anymore? Mm-hmm. And the mink farms have been gone for 40 years now. Yeah. So it seemed to me a very poorly thought out. I look at it as being just a very bureaucratic mumbo jumbo that didn't have any the market wasn't driving it at all. Basically, Chuck Burrows and maybe Julius Anderson thought, let's put these trawlers up here so we can catch a bunch of tulipies. And I think it caught more walleyes than they said, but I look at it and say, why did everybody bother? It seemed like a lot of controversy I don't see it really gained anything. Mm-hmm. And of course, as a commercial fisherman, of course, Dorrance with his paw nets and my father with the gill nets, they knew that the whole point of trawlers was to put them all out of business. That was the whole point, I think. One, feed the mink, and one, two, quit getting walleyes. And despite what everybody says, the commercial fishermen, we needed walleyes. That was our main money. Mm-hmm. Even back when we used to, I'd go back and, hey, we would fish back, yes, earlier. We'd go out, bring the fish. We'd bring the tulipies back to the mink farm. We lived up the river. Drop off all the walleyes to Maury's Fish Company or Selvog Fish Company, and we'd bring the tulipies back to the mink farm and freeze them until we needed them. But we always depended on walleyes. You get other people like the Buzzy Lem, the Herds, the Arnesons. They didn't have any mink farms. The Brewsters, they did have some mink farms, but we all depended on walleyes, all along. We always needed walleyes to make money because that was a money fish. After the tulipy market was collapsed because of the FDA ruling, we needed walleyes. So the DNR tried to switch that around and say, hey, let's get rid of all the walleye fishing. Well, they knew that was going to destroy us because we always needed walleyes for money. Mm-hmm. And the mink farming wasn't even, the mink farmers wanted to fish, but they weren't paying any money for it. You couldn't exist by selling tulipies to the mink farmers. So, I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts on the trawler. I thought, and of course, the trawler, I think I sent you that picture I found last summer out in Warroad History. It was sitting on the bottom, tipped over.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of crazy to think that those two boats are still here. The Jackie and the JLC Jean.
Yeah.
The JLC Jean is up on the ridge.
Yeah, you told me that. I remember that now. Yeah, it is still sitting there. Huh?
It's still sitting there, and that's the boat that Vicarious purchased, and then ended up capsizing and drowning. I'm not sure the history of the Jackie after commercial fishing either.
It's been sitting out there in Warroad Estates for a long time.
Yeah.
And obviously, where do they get the money to bring this in? There's a lot of intrigue on that, and I don't know how that happened. I know after my dad talks about the kind of the end of the trawler, he was fighting the trawler. It's interesting, the sportsmen and the commercial fishermen were all fighting the trawler. It was interesting. Politics make odd, strange bedfellows.
Exactly.
And that was kind of the start. If the trawler hadn't been there, could we have survived? Who knows? I don't know. It's easy for me to speculate that, well, the trawler generated so much controversy and it just kept going on and it kept snowballing for years till I got my license. Then they tried to put us out of business. They got rid of the trawler. Oh, no, they get rid of us too. Let's get rid of the cormorants. Hey, let's get rid of all the coots. I was like, but anyway, I divert here, Brady. Sorry.
Well, so with the trawlers, it's interesting. You mentioned it. It was such a controversy that not only were the commercial fishermen upset at them, but then also the sports fishermen kind of joined in on that as well. It was like it made enemies friends, though it was for a brief amount of time. But the commercial fishermen and the sports fishermen didn't really like the trawling operation.
Well, yeah, I know, and it was this. Reading back on some of the trawler stuff, I got a whole folder there of stuff my dad had collected, and that I look at it now just being, as I say, kind of silly. Like, why everybody argue over that? It wasn't a sustainable operation. It seemed to be out of line. It was out of place. The sportsmen looking at the stuff, they said it was destroying the walleye fishery. And I don't know. There wasn't really any evidence of that. The commercial fishermen didn't like it because they knew it was going to put them out of business. But I don't know. It was just odd. Then when the trawlers finally did go, they gave a fishing license to John Heinen. Was the first gillnet license, I mean. So that was the first new gillnet license issued since 1940 when John Heinen got a license. And somebody must have got a license from the pick trawler too. Did somebody get a license from that?
I'm not 100% sure about that. It's really interesting, that whole period, because the 1940s, they weren't going to issue any more licenses.
Yeah.
But then with the trawling, they issued licenses for commercial trawling, and then afterwards, it's a really weird period. So
well, it's weird. It's really easy for us to pontificate about politics. It's just all stupid and garbage. And I look at it as being, this is a kind of a typical case. I know you had mentioned that you thought the trawler was one of the bigger deals. I guess I disagree with that. I think the trawler controversy, the stuff I read, they weren't near as nasty as they were toward us back in the 70s and the 80s. They attacked us just viciously. And I see the stuff on the trawler, there seemed to be a little more rationality there. It was still politics, but it didn't seem to be quite as nasty.
Okay.
And I know they made enemies. I know Julius Anderson and my father, I mean, I'm sure they would go drinking together all the time, but I know they disagreed on a lot of stuff. But it wasn't nasty like it was. When they got rid of us gillnetters, it was vicious. It was just vicious, and I didn't see the trawlers being quite that vicious.
Okay.
It was politics, but it wasn't so vicious.
It wasn't attacking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, and when I was doing my research too, I mean, looking at, they had reports that were coming out from the DNR about the trawling operation, mean, the DNR fisheries were saying that it was a sustainable practice to have trawling on the lake, and the target species being the tulipy, trying to lower the number of their biomass out of the lake.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I got those two in the reports, and they said they were catching less walleyes and stuff than the gill netters were, and they had all those kind of reports. They clearly were promoting it. But I look back on it again, I mean, I kept thinking, why?
yeah,
It wasn't necessary.
yeah,
The trawler did catch walleyes, not as much. They only had 2 trawlers on there, but they did. And there was controversy there, and I'll just throw you some of the controversy I remember my dad talking about. Is the trawler's got a lot of saugers, and I know Art Johnston was talking about the mesh size allowed all the small walleyes to go through. Well, that's not so, because it caught a lot of saugers, according to the data, the ones you're talking about. You look at that, they caught a lot of saugers. And saugers are little. And saugers are going to go through, they're going to go through even a 3-inch mesh because they're small. But the trawler's got a lot of them. So they also brought up a lot of walleyes, and they were throwing back, I understand. And the question, my dad has a correspondences with somebody in Woods Hole, marine laboratory research out in Massachusetts, wherever Woods Hole is, and saying that the chances of throwing back live fish is pretty slim on a trawler. And because one, they're being crushed, they pull them up in the big bag, everybody's fish are this deep, and okay, there's a walleye in there, so they're going to survive that and throw that back. So I think there was some controversies there which were never really resolved, and I think not really talked about. My personal feeling is my personal feeling, Brady. We've all got personal feelings on that. I don't think it really impacted the sport fishery personally. There was a big push. Here I'm being, some of my commercial fishermen won't like me now, but I don't know if the rough fish are really the bane of walleye fishing as people were talking about back then. I look at Lake of the Woods, this big aquatic environment. And there have been tulipies here for a million years, or well, whenever since Lake Agassiz receded.
yeah.
Which wasn't that long. That was only like 10,000 years
that
ago,
was-
right? Yeah, not millions, 10,000.
That's like yesterday
Yeah,
compared to time, right?
Yeah, but they have been there. The lake is healthy, and I don't know. I don't know if we try to justify why we had to keep fishing. One of my dad's justifications was, without the rough fish, they're going to take over and all the walleyes will go away. Well, that hasn't happened, I don't think. I mean, there's a lot of people fishing out there. I'm assuming they're catching fish. Now, I haven't looked at the latest. You probably looked at the latest DNR data. I haven't.
And people are still catching fish.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Nobody's catching any tulipies, and we know there's millions of tulipies out in the lake. I'm assuming they still make up 50% of the biomass of the fish.
I'm curious about that. I'm not 100% sure on the biomass now, because back in the day, but I mean, even people talk about coming in on the Marvin's Plains, that if you get the sun right, you can see the just masses of the schools of them.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting.
But I'm not sure how true it is, because you don't have people. I mean, they do the creel studies now, but it's not like you've got a dozen or more commercial fishermen being like, well, we got a huge year at tulipy this year.
Yeah, well, one of the things the fishermen gave, I mean, we were another methodology and of testing to see what is the health. I mean, our effort was very controlled. We didn't have quotas, but our quota was how much gear we could use. We had 3,000 feet of gill net. And now depending where the wind blows, is a warm year, hot year, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of variance on that, but it is a way to judge the population changes of fish. And I think much better. Creel surveys I don't think do squat. I mean, it's like you're doing one species, right?
Yeah.
Maybe a few saugers, maybe a few perch, maybe some northern pike.
Nobody's out there targeting too.
No, and I think the one article from the Grand Forks paper, I showed you the last couple of weeks of fishing, I was catching really a lot of walleyes right outside, I think off of spring steels. And they said, oh, okay, they all made a bet with themselves. Who's going to catch it? They bought their hook. Oh, you're catching a lot of walleye. Yeah, I think walleye fishing is great. I was fling up lots of walleyes and selling lots of walleyes. Well, I want to come out with you. I said, yeah, I let anybody come out on the boat. It was really fun. You know, I wanted people to see what we were doing. Hey, we were completely transparent. And they'd come out there and they were fishing. And they didn't catch one fish. I was hauling in walleyes, all kinds of walleyes. I probably had 500 pounds of walleyes that day or something. They didn't catch one. They finally just put away their fishing gear, and we just talked. And they came in, probably bought some walleyes to take home. So the gear and the quantity of it, the creel surveys it's a very small thing. That's why I say fishery science is kind of an oxymoron. You want to do it, yeah, you do the best you can, but it makes it very easy to politically manipulate the data because the data is kind of iffy at best.
So you got involved with the politics of commercial fishing because your father was politically involved. Do you know when he kind of started advocating for commercial fishermen?
I think it was really on the trawler days when we're reading at that, because that's when he got real active. That's when he started to know Chuck Burrows. I remember my dad was kind of a mover and a shaker. He was very entrepreneur. He had Lakewood Park, which I ended up buying. That's another story. But it's like he was a good speaker, and he went to Dale Carnegie's speech class. I remember with Bob Brooklyn, the former Secretary of Agriculture under Jimmy Carter, and he really liked his speaking. He was a very good speaker, but I think he mainly got involved back in the trawler days. I remember him telling a story about Chuck Burrows once. This is an interesting story. Chuck Burrows, they were trying to do some trap nets. I don't know what boat he had, but they were up here doing something. And he said, Chuck Burrows is coming up the Selvog dock, and they got the rope caught on the screw of the boat. It's happened to us all the time, right? Hey, you go out to the lake every day, for 12 hours a day, something's going to happen. You're always diving under the boat, cutting off ropes. I mean, doing all that kind of stuff. That's just what you did. But so here's Chuck Burrows, this bureaucrat from the DNR down in Minneapolis. And he's coming up to the fishery dock, and he gets his rope screw taut in the screw. And so what's he do? Excuse me. So my dad says, Chuck Burrows, he rips off his clothes and jumps in, and this was like in the fall when the water is cold. Puts a knife in, he said he put his knife in his mouth, jumps under the water and cuts the rope off the screw of the boat. And so my dad, he respected Chuck Burrows when he did that. All the people said, oh yeah, what's this guy going to do now? Well, he did the right thing. He had to go out, and everybody said, ooh, this guy's all right. So that's the first story I remember my dad talking about Chuck Burrows. And no, they were doing something with trap nets. I don't know what they were doing. I don't know where they got them. I don't know what happened to that. I have no idea. But,
so he was moving down. He was going down to the cities and meeting with the kind of similar to what you were doing in the 80s.
Yeah. Well, my dad kept being very active in the 80s too.
Okay.
Like, I was not a good speaker. Believe it or not, I used to be not speaking all the time. And now, I used to consider myself an introvert. Now I'm an extrovert. But anyway, hey, that's another story. You eventually, as you get older, you become some skills you gain. And I've gained. I do a lot of speaking on various things now. And so my dad, he was right to the end. He negotiated the transfer and everything. I probably did more in the last year. I probably did more than my dad. But everything was done then. Hey, we all lost, and we knew we were just trying to pick up the pieces. But no, he was active way back then. I remember we see a bunch of letters in the files there. To Julius Anderson, him and they were going back and forth, and But no, he was a real creative guy. My dad was. Yeah. And a good speaker. Yeah. And I'm still not as good a speaker as him. I remember he'd be really good. I can sit down and write up stuff and read it, but hey, I'm not very good at extemporaneous. Well, you're probably going to, after seeing this, you'll say, oh yeah, right.
But you've gotten into politics since
Yeah,
all of that. So
yeah. Well, yeah, I have, and again, the first politics I got involved in was, well, after I moved from Warroad. After I moved, I was tired of, didn't want to have anything to do with Minnesota politics. All these crooked people and a bunch of liars, creeps, blah blah blah, and so I left and went to college. I got a degree. Ended up working for the U.S. Forest Service, as an engineer, and we did bridges and buildings and towers, and so I still do that stuff. So I became active in the union in the Forest Service. It was interesting, and so I ended up went to went to D.C. actually quite a bit. I was the legislative chair for the union. And I was the budget guy and everything for the whole, federal budget and all that kind of stuff. And so I'd go, we gave testimony at committees in Washington, D.C. and Capitol Hill and stuff. But one of the things that, bringing us back to what we're doing here, of course, I used to go, and by then Colin Peterson was a representative for the U.S. House, of course, from Congressional District 7 here in Minnesota. So I'd walk by his house, or go into the state office building, and all these buildings down there. That's what I'm doing. I'm a lobbyist kind of for the union, trying to make the Forest Service more productive. That's a whole other story. But anyway, so I'd walk by. Colin Peterson was actually the head of the agriculture. He was the chairman of the Agriculture Committee in the House. Now, the Forest Service was in the Interior Committee, so hey, that's a whole other story. But anyway, so once I said, let's go in and see Colin Peterson. So I said, hey, so I go in there and see Colin Peterson. And I said, Colin, how you doing? Oh, how's it doing? How's your dad? Hey, we're doing the normal little chit-chatty stuff. And so I said, Colin, he said, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm here because of you, Colin. You ran me out of business. So I went in, and I got a degree, and here I am, now a lobbyist for the Forest Service Union. And so we laughed. He said, well, the reason I'm here is because of you, because I put you out of business. And he said, well, what else can you do? You just got to sit and laugh about that stuff. And it was good. So I had to go in there, and we'd sit there and chit-chat for 5 minutes whenever I'd go down to D.C. And I was there to D.C. a lot. So anyway, that's some of my history. And I'm bringing it back to our fishing history. Colin Peterson was there, and I was there because of the fishing.
Yeah. So commercial fishing, it ended because of nasty politics.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no other way around it. Now, I don't know if you're going to ask me this or not, but I'll bring it up. Is could we have survived? Looking back on it, of course, fishing is very hard physical. It's pretty hard physical labor, but. And he had back problems all the time. And so probably, fishing as a young man, here I am 74 now, and it's like, oh my, I don't know if I could still be fishing or not. Ralph Kling was fishing, I think, when he was older, and he was hunched over on his back all the time and stuff. But I think we could have survived. And one, we have more modern boats. I think we could have done. I think we could have worked better with the sport fishermen. Not people like Dick Knutson, they were just nasty people. But the normal people, I think we could have fished. I think it's an important thing for the economy, for people. There's an historical thing that I think is important, the Historical Society. What did we do? How did we contribute to the economy? We contribute to the restaurants here, and people want to know what happened. What did we grow up? And I think we could have done better. I tried to do some of that. We tried to get the tulipy ban removed, but people told me, I said, hey, you're just wasting your time. DNR is never going to help. And but I think if we could have survived that, I think we could have survived, because I think nowadays people want to go catch walleyes, but they also want to do something else. They want to eat walleyes too. And I think it would be good for the lake to keep some kind of a commercial fishing going. The only thing that was viable was the gillnet fishery, and the gillnet fishery, I think, it's effective, but it's also very selective too. It's effective and selective, and that's what the DNR wanted, but the DNR doesn't ever admit that. And we weren't the only fishing group that lost. I mean, the sport fishermen, they attacked commercial fishing everywhere in the country. I mean, down in Florida, down in Texas, out in Maine. I mean, we got attacked viciously by sport fishermen, and I think that's kind of going away now a little bit. But I think that one reason is because none of us left. But so we weren't unique. They just kind of jumped on the bandwagon. It was definitely a social contagion to go after us commercial fishermen. If we could have survived, I think it would be fun. I'd really enjoy now to go back and dealing with the sportsmen and everything. And hey, let's have, how can I keep out of your hair? How can you keep out of my hair? Let's do all this stuff. Let's be as effective as we can mainly to keep the fishery, the lake, healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have a lot of good start on that. We've cleaned up a lot of the pollution we talked about earlier about, hey, maybe mercury pollution out of the Rainy River, all these kind of things. And, I think we've done a lot. And, hey, let's keep this lake healthy. And I think the commercial fishermen could have been or should have been a part of that. But, hey, it's been the past now.
Yeah, a bit late now, but
Yeah.
it was interesting going through a lot of those DNR reports because, I mean, the trend in all of them was that it was a healthy fishery.
Yeah.
When there was sports fishery and a commercial fishery, I mean, it was a healthy, sustainable fishery. So,
Yeah.
and it's pretty interesting how quickly it turned. I mean,
Well, it's odd. We talked about this before, but to say it again is that, the sport fishermen, they went after us, but they also went after the DNR. I mean, some of those papers I have on there, they attacked Joseph Alexander just viciously. Just said the same nasty thing about him that they said about us. And why they didn't just say, "Hey, screw you guys," I'm not gonna do what you tell me to do, but he did anyway. And they succumbed to that, and maybe the $2.50. But it's too bad because I think if the DNR would have been doing their job properly, then we would still be here, and hey, my kids would be fishing again and all that kind of stuff. But